Okay, so have you ever like been in that situation where you're just like stuck dealing
Yeah.
with some process that seems so needlessly complicated?
Yeah, for sure.
Like maybe it's, I don't know, dealing with like an airline, or like trying to figure out some ridiculous software update, or even just thinking back to like how hard it was to find information before we had Google.
Yeah.
It's like, why does this have to be this hard? What if like all of those frustrating steps just kind of vanished, you know?
I think that feeling of friction, that moment of like, there's got to be a better way. That's often like where real innovation kind of begins, right?
Yeah.
So.
That's exactly what we're going to be kind of diving into today, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to the deep dive, everybody.
Yes.
Today, we're unpacking this concept called decoupling the customer value chain.
Oh, interesting.
We've sent us some really cool stuff, and we're going to be exploring this really central idea from it that I think has the potential to like really change how you look at businesses and like how new ideas take hold.
Oh, cool.
You know, these moments of customer frustration, these aren't just like random annoyances. They can actually be like clues to really big opportunities.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So our goal today is to kind of get a solid understanding of like what this customer value chain actually is, how it can be kind of strategically broken apart, or decoupled as they say. And then crucially, why this is such a powerful way of looking at like how successful new businesses kind of emerge and shake up entire industries, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna see how looking at things this way can help us spot opportunities to make things better, or even like completely reinvent them.
Interesting.
And to help us kind of navigate all of this, we have with us today somebody who has really lived and breathed this stuff. They've not only taught this very concept to MBA students at Harvard and UC, but they've also worked directly with numerous startups, you know, applying these very principles in the real world.
Yeah.
So think of them as our expert guide to this really fascinating territory.
Happy to be here. Happy to share some insights.
Awesome. Now, speaking of, you know, forward-thinking approaches, a big shout out to our sponsor, Stonefly. Stonefly is all about, you know, tackling data challenges head on, you know.
Yeah.
They offer this really comprehensive suite of storage solutions, covering everything from high-performance SAN and flexible NAS to cloud-integrated S3 object storage, all wrapped up with like really robust backup and disaster recovery capabilities, right?
Yeah. What's really interesting about Stonefly, I think, is how they're thinking about, you know, the modern data landscape, right?
Yeah.
They're providing these advanced services like immutable snapshots, right, for bulletproof recovery, strong encryption to keep your data secure, and smart replication to ensure business continuity. It's all about giving organizations the tools that they need to protect and manage their data effectively.
Right. And they've made it like surprisingly easy to manage all of this stuff, you know.
Yeah.
With a single intuitive interface, whether you're dealing with like a small setup or a large multi-site deployment. So if you're facing challenges with data protection, need to scale your storage, boost performance, or even, you know, upgrade your existing infrastructure, you know, across storage, backup, disaster recovery, hyper-converged systems, and servers including, you know, VMware, Hyper-V, and Proxmox, Stonefly offers competitive pricing and really solid support.
Yeah. And for those of you out there looking at, you know, data solutions, Stonefly's actually got a couple of pretty compelling offers right now worth checking out.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. They've got a promotional deal going on right now for immutable and air-gapped backup for just $10. And they're also offering a pretty substantial 70 terabyte backup and disaster recovery appliance, which, by the way, is expandable to a massive 4 petabytes with advanced ransomware protection features, all for $700.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about how Stonefly can help your business, reach out to sales at stonefly.com.
Awesome. All right, let's kind of get into the heart of what we're talking about today. This idea of the customer value chain. Our sources define this as essentially like the entire sequence of steps a customer goes through to kind of like get, use, and eventually move on from a product or service, right?
Yeah.
And think back to those initial like frustrations we were talking about.
Wow.
Like, where do they come from?
Right.
It's often somewhere within that chain of activity. So let's take a really simple example, right? Like opening a checking account.
Right.
Right. So if we map out that journey, like what are those steps?
Yeah. It involves several distinct steps. for you as a customer, right?
Yeah.
So first there's the research phase. You're comparing different banks, their fees, their services.
Right.
Then you likely have to physically go to a branch.
Yeah.
And then comes the application process,
Yep.
filling out forms, providing ID.
Yep.
And finally, after approval, you receive your account details, maybe a checkbook.
Yeah.
Each of these is a link in that customer value chain, right?
Yeah.
For getting a checking account.
Okay, so we've kind of laid out these steps. Now what's the next kind of crucial thing to look for here? Our source material talks about identifying the weak link. So what exactly is that?
Yeah, the weak link refers to those specific activities within that customer value chain, right?
Right.
That consistently lead to dissatisfaction for customers, when they're dealing with established companies.
Right.
These are the points of friction, the moments of frustration, inefficiency or unnecessary cost in the existing way of doing things.
Yeah.
And that dissatisfaction, that weak link, that's where we find really fertile ground for new ideas and innovation. Right?
Got it. So once we've pinpointed that weak link, that's where this idea of decoupling comes into play. So can you explain what decoupling actually means in this context?
Yeah, decoupling is the strategic process of breaking apart that traditional customer value chain, right?
Oh.
Often this is driven by a new, often digital-first company that focuses intensely on one specific activity or a small set of activities that were historically all bundled together by the existing players in the market. So let's think about our taxi example, right? Traditionally, if you needed a ride, your options were pretty limited.
Yeah.
You either try to hail a cab on the street or you call a central dispatch.
Right. And you were really kind of at the mercy of chance or like a potentially really busy phone line and an unknown wait time.
Exactly. And then along came ride-sharing services, right?
Yep.
And what they fundamentally did was decouple the value chain of getting a ride by hyper-focusing on that matchmaking aspect, right?
Yeah.
Connecting people who needed a ride with drivers who were available. They recognized that the inherent inefficiencies and uncertainties in that old bundled system.
Yeah. That paints a really clear picture. It's about taking, one component of this overall process and making it like the absolute core focus, right?
Right.
And often making it much more streamlined and effective.
Precisely, yeah.
Now, our sources mentioned that there are actually like 3 different kind of fundamental ways to decouple a value chain.
Oh, okay.
Right. Can you kind of walk us through those different types?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first type is what we call, value creating decoupling. And this involves separating out an activity from the existing value chain that when offered on its own, it actually generates significant new value for the customer, right? So a really compelling example of this is Twitch.
Okay.
In the world of video games.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
So think about it. Traditionally, the value in a video game came from like buying it and playing it yourself.
Right.
But Twitch came along and allowed, millions of people to derive entertainment and value simply by watching other people play.
Exactly. So playing a game is inherently a value creating activity.
Yeah.
But Twitch recognized that watching someone else play, especially if they're skilled or entertaining, is also a distinct value creating activity in its own right.
Yeah.
Right. They unbundled that experience. And interestingly, this kind of decoupling can sometimes even create entirely new economies around activities that were previously just hobbies.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. Like creating value where it didn't explicitly exist before in that standalone way.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, what's the second type of decoupling?
Yeah. So the second type is what we call value-eroding decoupling.
Okay.
And this is all about identifying and then eliminating an activity from the customer value chain that customers typically find inconvenient,
Yeah.
undesirable, or just a hassle.
Yeah.
So think back to how we used to acquire video games, right?
Sure.
Before the rise of digital distribution.
No, the whole ritual of like going to the video game store, browsing the shelves, hoping that the game you wanted was in stock.
Yeah.
Dealing with rentals, potential late fees,
Yeah.
it was a whole process.
Exactly. So that entire process of physically going to a store, selecting a game, making the purchase a rental, and then potentially having to return it. For many, those are value eroding activities.
Yeah.
And Steam came along and fundamentally decoupled this, right? By offering digital downloads and streaming of video games, and completely removing that inconvenient physical trip and the associated hassles.
Right. So less friction, more convenience. It's about focusing on the core value, playing the game, and getting rid of all the annoying steps around it.
Exactly.
Okay. And the third type.
Yeah. So the third type is what we call value capturing decoupling.
Okay.
This involves fundamentally changing how a company extracts value or makes money from its customers. So the freemium model that's so prevalent in mobile gaming with games like Fortnite being a prime example. This illustrates this perfectly, right?
Okay, so instead of that traditional model where you pay up front to even access and play the game.
Right. They decoupled the core value proposition, right?
Yeah.
The ability to play a high quality game from the immediate requirement to pay, so players can download and start playing for free.
Yeah.
And then the company captures value later on through optional in-app purchases like cosmetic enhancements, virtual items, or other non-essential features.
Right.
So the way they make money is fundamentally shifted. Right?
Yeah, that's a really powerful shift in how businesses kind of think about monetization.
Yeah.
Now, our source material makes this really interesting point that venture capitalists seem to have a certain preference when it comes to these different types of decoupling.
Oh yeah.
What kind do they tend to favor?
Yeah, it's quite insightful. Venture capitalists often show a stronger inclination towards startups that are centered around decoupling value-creating activities.
Okay.
So while all three types of decoupling can certainly lead to significant growth and successful businesses,
Right.
the creation of entirely new ways for customers to derive value often captures the attention and investment dollars of VCs. Perhaps it's because this type of decoupling can open up entirely new markets and user bases.
Interesting. So like fundamentally creating a new benefit for customers seems particularly attractive to investors. Now, when customers experience this decoupling, right? What's the typical impact on them, and how does the concept of coupling kind of come into play after that initial decoupling?
Right. So when a startup successfully decouples a part of the value chain and really nails that specific activity, customers often feel that this particular aspect of the experience is now being done, much better.
Yeah.
With greater focus, efficiency, and often at a lower cost or with more convenience than before.
Right.
They naturally gravitate towards these more specialized solutions.
Right.
And following this initial kind of disruptive move, successful startups frequently engage in what's known as coupling. And this is the strategic process of adding, related or adjacent activities back into their service offerings, right?
Okay.
Essentially expanding their footprint within the broader customer value chain.
Right. So our source uses Uber as like a really, really clear example of this, right?
Yeah.
They started by just focusing on ride sharing. Yeah. That core matchmaking function. But then they strategically coupled additional services like food delivery with Uber Eats and even package delivery, right?
Exactly. So by first excelling at that core decoupled function, efficiently connecting riders and drivers,
Right.
they built a massive user base, right?
Yeah.
A strong brand and the underlying infrastructure. Yeah. And this then allowed them to seamlessly kind of integrate and offer these related services, right?
Yeah.
Further disrupting existing players in those adjacent markets. So it's like a natural evolution for a successful decoupled business.
So it's almost like you break things down to really master one specific pain point, and then you strategically kind of build back out.
Exactly. Yeah.
By addressing other related needs.
Yeah.
Now, a really crucial point that our source emphasizes is that it's simply like decoupling a part of the value chain and providing some form of value doesn't automatically translate into financial success.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on why that is?
Yeah, that's a vital piece of the puzzle
Yeah.
because while you might be solving a real customer pain point through decoupling,
Yeah.
right, and even creating significant value, financial success is far from guaranteed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs often have to navigate a complex journey of building their business operations, scaling their reach, and critically figuring out a sustainable and profitable business model.
Right.
They need to determine how they will capture enough of the value that they're creating, right?
Yeah.
To not only cover their costs, but also generate a healthy profit in the long run.
Right.
So there's no automatic link between providing customer value through decoupling and building a thriving, profitable enterprise.
Right.
It often requires significant experimentation and adaptation.
So it sounds like having a great idea for decoupling is just the first step in a much longer and often challenging process.
Right.
Now, our source breaks down the actual process of decoupling into like 5 key steps. And they use the example of PillPack to illustrate
Yeah.
this.
Okay.
Can you walk us through those 5 steps?
Yeah, absolutely. PillPack is a fantastic case study that really brings this framework to life.
Okay, so let's start with step 1, right? Mapping the customer value chain.
Right.
For someone like PillPack's target customer, right?
Right.
So someone who needs to take multiple daily medications. What did that value chain typically look like?
Yeah. So for an individual managing, multiple prescriptions,
Yeah.
the traditional value chain is quite involved. It can be a real source of frustration.
Yeah.
It starts with, going to the doctor, getting diagnosed, and receiving 1 or more prescriptions.
Yeah.
Then there's the trip to the pharmacy to pick up each medication, often at different times.
Right.
The patient then has to, figure out how to organize these pills right.
Yeah.
Potentially multiple times a day with specific instructions for each.
Yeah.
And then of course actually remember to take them at the right times.
Right.
And the ultimate goal, right?
Yeah.
Feeling better
Yeah.
is often somewhat removed from all of this logistical complexity.
Yeah. That sounds incredibly complicated, especially for someone who might already be dealing with health issues on top of all of that. Okay, step 2 is classifying those activities, right, within the value chain.
Right.
So how did PillPack kind of categorize these different things?
Right. So they categorized each step as either value creating, value capturing, or value eroding
Okay.
from the customer's perspective.
Okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
in this scenario, the core value creating activity is actually taking the medication as prescribed to improve one's health.
Wow.
The value capturing aspects are paying for the doctor's visits and purchasing the medications themselves.
Yep.
Everything else going to the doctor and pharmacy, the complex task of managing multiple prescriptions and dosages and remembering the correct timing for each pill was largely classified as value eroding.
Okay.
Right. These are necessary steps,
Yes.
right, to get the benefit of the medication.
Right.
But they don't inherently provide positive value to the customer. They're more like obstacles to overcome.
Right. They're the hurdles that you have to jump through to get to that actual benefit.
Right.
So step 3 is identifying the weak link in this chain.
Mhm.
What did PillPack kind of pinpoint as that key area of dissatisfaction?
So PillPack recognized that for individuals taking multiple medications, particularly older adults or those with complex health regimens, the sheer complexity of organizing and consistently remembering to take the correct pills at the correct times was a major pain point. That was the clear weak link in the existing value chain.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Forgetting doses, taking the wrong medication at the wrong time. Those are not only like inconvenient, but could potentially have some serious health consequences as well.
Good.
So step 4 is described as kind of like break apart and steal the activity. How did PillPack actually achieve that?
Yeah, so PillPack's ingenious solution was to create a subscription service.
Okay.
So So customers could have all of their prescriptions sent directly to PillPack.
Yeah.
PillPack would then handle the purchasing of the medications, meticulously organize them into individual prepackaged doses, clearly labeled with the date and time they needed to be taken.
Wow.
And then deliver these customized packs directly to the customer's door on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So they essentially they completely took over that burdensome organization and management task
Right.
on behalf of the customer.
That's brilliant. They completely removed that central point of friction
Right.
for their target customer.
Yeah.
And finally, step 5 is understanding and preempting responses.
Right.
So what kind of responses did PillPack anticipate from the existing players in the market?
Yeah. So PillPack was keenly aware that traditional brick and mortar pharmacies might not be particularly enthusiastic about offering a similar service.
Right.
Right. So while they technically could do the same thing, sorting and delivering prepackaged medications, doing so could significantly reduce in-store foot traffic, which is a vital component of their business model, right? As it drives impulse purchases and other over-the-counter sales.
Right.
So PillPack correctly anticipated that this lack of strong competitive response from the major pharmacy chains would give them a significant window to grow their business, which ultimately led to their very successful acquisition by a major player.
So by really understanding the underlying incentives and potential disincentives of the established players, right?
Yeah.
PillPack could kind of anticipate that they might not face, immediate and aggressive counter moves. That's a really key strategic insight.
Yeah.
Now, our source emphasizes one of these 5 steps as being like particularly crucial for achieving successful disruption through decoupling. Which step would you say that is?
Yeah, without a doubt, the most important step is identifying the weakest link in the customer value chain. That specific point that causes the greatest frustration and dissatisfaction for customers.
Yeah.
This is where the most significant opportunities for truly successful and impactful disruption reside.
Yeah.
And the example of the insurance industry we mentioned earlier really underscores this, right? The sheer difficulty customers faced in trying to compare, complex insurance policies from different companies was a massive weak link. And that directly led to the rise of numerous insurtech companies specifically focused on making that comparison process far easier and more transparent.
That really resonates. Anyone who's ever tried to wade through like pages of insurance policy details knows exactly what that pain point feels like.
Yeah.
So what are some of the key triggers or signals that might indicate like potential opportunities for decoupling within a given industry or process?
Yeah, so our source highlights a few important triggers to watch out for.
Yeah.
Firstly, significant shifts in customer behavior, whether driven by evolving needs and preferences, or the emergence of previously unmet desires can create openings for decoupling.
Yep.
Secondly, widespread customer unhappiness or dissatisfaction with existing processes is a very strong indicator.
Yeah.
And this unhappiness often boils down to an activity being perceived as too expensive, either in terms of money or crucially time.
Yeah.
Taking an unacceptably long time to complete or requiring a disproportionate amount of effort from the customer. So the widespread shift from purchasing physical media like DVDs to the instant access and convenience of streaming services, right?
Yep.
Perfectly illustrates the power of reducing customer effort.
Absolutely.
Right.
Who wants to like drive to a store and potentially face like late fees when you can access this vast library of content instantly from your couch?
Right.
Now let's touch on a technology that's been generating a lot of buzz and has the potential to really reshape many industries.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Particularly generative AI.
Yeah.
What role do you see AI playing in the context of decoupling the customer value chain?
Yeah, so AI, including generative AI, is undoubtedly a powerful and incredibly versatile tool that has the potential to be applied to decoupling in numerous ways. But it's really important to remember that AI at its core is a general purpose technology.
Right.
Much like the internet or even computers themselves were in their early days.
Right.
So its successful application in decoupling hinges on identifying very specific activities within a value chain where AI can genuinely and significantly reduce cost, time, or effort for the customer.
Yeah.
So there's a real risk of getting caught up in the hype and trying to apply AI for the sake of it without a deep understanding of the fundamental customer pain points.
So it's not just about like throwing AI at a problem and hoping that something innovative sticks. It needs to be much more targeted than that.
Exactly. The most effective and impactful uses of AI in decoupling will likely emerge in areas where customers are already experiencing significant dissatisfaction due to high cost, lengthy, and inconvenient timelines, or a substantial amount of required effort.
Right.
So if you're considering leveraging AI as a tool for decoupling, the key is to first pinpoint those existing weak links in the customer journey, and then explore precisely how AI can be strategically deployed to alleviate that specific pain in a meaningful way.
That's a really important caution and a really great way to kind of think about it. The technology should be driven by the customer's needs and frustrations, not just by the capabilities of the technology itself.
Precisely.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful discussion. Let's quickly kind of recap some of the key takeaways for you, right?
Yeah.
We've explored the concept of the customer value chain, the critical importance of identifying those weak links that cause customer frustration, and the three distinct ways that a value chain can be decoupled by creating new value, by eroding undesirable steps, and by fundamentally changing how value is captured.
Right.
We've also highlighted the significance of focusing on genuine customer dissatisfaction as the prime opportunity for disruption.
Yeah.
And touched on the potential and also the limitations of technologies like AI in this process.
And hopefully, as we've kind of gone through this, you've had some of those moments connecting these principles to the successes and perhaps even the struggles of various businesses you encounter every day.
Yeah.
You know, this framework really does provide a powerful new lens for analyzing market dynamics and understanding why certain startups manage to gain traction so quickly by laser focusing on very specific customer pain points.
Absolutely. You might now be thinking about how you could apply this framework to specific industries you're deeply familiar with.
Yeah.
Or perhaps even pondering the longer term consequences and ripple effects of these ongoing decoupling trends, right?
Right.